There is so much cat hair on this mic. If you are watching the video on YouTube of this episode, apologies for that. Just don't think about it, and then it's basically not real. So it's yeah. I mean, I'm trying to pick it off, but I mean, there's no point. It's covered. I'm not gonna get it off. I'm also in my bedroom for this episode, a little special episode where you know get invited to my boudoir. The reason I'm in my bedroom instead of on the sofa where I usually am, which is in the office, is because the light in this room in the evening is just incredible. The way that we kind of laid out our apartment is that we get sun all day, but on different sides of the house. So essentially, our office gets the most sun in the morning and the like early afternoon, and then from like 3 p.m. onwards, the light in our bedroom is just so lovely. And so I hang out here all the time in the evenings because it's just so nice. Why wouldn't you? It is a little bit overexposed on the camera, but I'm glad about that because it means you can't see outside the window, which is really important when trying not to have people turn up to your house. So yeah, it doesn't look as nice on the video as it is in real life. I'm also wearing a bunch of makeup, which is kind of related to today's topic. Well, not really. So that was kind of a lie. Uh, Essentially, I've talked about this a bunch of times. I'm not very good at makeup, and I often don't wear makeup on the podcast because it's kind of chill vibes over here. But I was trying to film a TikTok of a cosplay earlier. If you don't know, I'm a big anime nerd. I I spend far too much of my time watching anime. And I just did a kakaguri, kakaguri. Well, it's really great that I just said that I'm an anime nerd and then can't pronounce the name of the anime. Uh, Never mind. I just did a cosplay for that anime. I've genuinely been watching so much anime at the moment because I just finished uni. If you don't know, I finished uni. I'm done forever. Which is terrifying, scary, and I haven't really known what to do with myself. I think I've had 2 weeks now since I finished uni. This is my second week, like today. Um, and I spent pretty much the entirety of that binge watching animes. Rest and rejuvenate. Do what's good for you. I really love anime. And so I have been getting back into doing cosplay. I really enjoy dressing up. I always have since I was a kid, and cosplay is kind of just like dress up but for adults. And it's something that I really enjoy. However, part of cosplaying is not just the clothes, it's also a lot of the time the makeup and, wigs. And I am terrible at that. I'm so bad. As you can see, I mean, this episode, well, maybe not see, because this is technically a podcast. So if you're not watching, sorry about that. But I wore mascara, but not mascara. No, I do wear mascara, actually. Sorry. I'm just lying. I'm a compulsive liar, I think. Uh, Why tell the truth? It's boring. I'm wearing eyeliner, is what I meant to say. And I don't know if you can really see. I gave it my best shot. I really did. I don't wear it a lot because I'm terrible. It ends up looking wonky. But I really wanted to try and do this cosplay look with, the whole get up, the whole face. The problem is, I am not good at makeup. And I've talked about this a bunch. But I don't know if I've necessarily deep dived into why I'm not good at makeup. And that's the topic of today's episode, is internalized misogyny and pick-me's. When I was 14 years old, roughly, I would probably say I was a pick-me. I don't think I was a full pick-me because I wasn't really doing it to get the attention of men per se, but it was more that I had a lot of internalized misogyny and that I rejected femininity and feminine things because I thought that was feminist. Contradictory, I know. Like, it's in the title, bestie. How do you mess up the assignment that heavy? But when I was a kid, I really was pro-feminism. I was pro-justice, pro-choice, pro-live, laugh, love, And unfortunately, there's this weird phenomenon almost that happens, and it's happened to a lot of young women. And I know it's not just me because I've talked to a bunch of my friends about this before, that when you are younger, you kind of get the urge, very much in the pick-me vein, of rejecting femininity is a stage through which lots of young feminists go through. Because you feel that in order to be a feminist, you have to reject things that stereotype women as stupid or incapable or dumb, right? And a lot of the time, that's the things that we see in, for example, Legally Blonde. You know, they talk like this, they, like Soleil, that kind of voice, and wearing pink and being interested in stereotypically girly things or feminine things like makeup or doing nail varnish or being in love with high heels or skirts or dresses. All things, by the way, which are perfectly valid and wonderful parts of self-expression and character growth, you know? Things that I felt that as a young feminist, I had to reject because otherwise I was endorsing this stereotype that women are stupid. I don't know if that makes any sense, because it doesn't. It doesn't make sense realistically, and I don't know why your girl thought that, but it's kind of like, for me, the basis of being a pick me, right? Because when you're a pick me, usually it's because you're doing it for male attention. So you say, you know, I'm not like other girls, the classic, which, by the way, is what I'm talking about, internalized misogyny. That's what I was doing. I was being like, I'm not like those girls who are obsessed with makeup and fake tan and looking cute as hell. I'm crusty, musty, dusty. Your girl only washes her face with water and moisturizes occasionally. Uh, eyeliner? I don't think so. I just didn't want to embrace any of those things because I felt like it took away from my ability to be a good feminist. In reality, it doesn't, of course. We know this, and I'll go more into why later. But that was kind of the basis of being a pick me, is that you're not like other women because those stereotypical female things, or feminine things, I should probably say, are inherently not slay. They are the antithesis to being a successful woman. If you want to be a baddie in STEM, if you want to be a woman who is thriving, getting her money, getting the promotion, doing all of these live, laugh, love things, then you cannot be feminine. You won't be respected. You won't be appreciated. And there is kind of truth in that. You won't be respected very much in traditionally male dominated fields. And that is fucked, first and foremost. Fucked. That is a patriarchal construct, which unfortunately is the reality. However, playing into the reality of the situation does nothing to better the situation. So when we say, for example, we look at Elle Woods, because she is the perfect example of this, is that law is a male-dominated field in terms of the most successful people in that industry are men and have been men historically. So when you go into that field as a young woman, as a lawyer, there is an expectation that you will conform to the pre-established masculine characterization of what a lawyer is. So you will wear the suits, you will wear the grey, and don't get me wrong, feminine presenting people in suits. Bit of me, happy Pride Month. But if you are someone who enjoys dressing feminine, who enjoys wearing pink, and enjoys doing their hair and their makeup and serving looks, to be quite frank with you, you may feel that you have to give that up, which you shouldn't have to. And we're kind of stuck in this awkward situation where you shouldn't have to sacrifice those things and you should be able to do that. But because of this kind of patriarchal vibe, people are not going to take you seriously in that industry. And so a lot of people, unfortunately, do feel that they have to conform. And that doesn't make them a bad person to do that, by the way. If you are someone who enjoys dressing, circa Elle Woods, and you have toned down your personal style because you wanted to be viewed as professional at work, that is not a bad thing. And that is not you being not a feminist. That is you, getting your bag, doing what you have to do to be respected in your field as the intelligent person that you are. But it is difficult because on the individual level, that's totally valid. But then we look on the systemic level, how do we then challenge the preconceived notion that we should all dress like that to be respected? And then you could argue, well, on the individual level, we all need to be pushing blah, blah, blah. But you can't expect people to potentially risk, aspects of their job or their livelihood so that they can wear a pretty skirt, And it's really sad because both sides are completely valid in that, one, people need to be able to make their money and be successful in their industry and be respected. And that may mean that they have to conform to the standard that is set already in that industry. But when that standard is based on patriarchal values, as in traditionally masculine presenting things and a rejection of femininity and this idea that feminine is ditzy or incapable, how do we challenge that? how do we get rid of that if we're all conforming to it? But at the same time, it's not your fault if you do want to conform to it, because who doesn't want an easy life? And it's, it's really difficult. And that is kind of the basis of where this kind of pick me vibe comes from a lot of the time, except it's not often done for the respect of a job. Often the pick me thing is for the attention of men in a romantic competitive situation, right? So instead of, I think it was Beyonce who said this in her Lemonade album, Love You Babe. She said that women competing for jobs or competing in like academic settings, we love this. And it's actually a really positive thing because women can bring out the best in each other in their fields, respectively. But women are often, in the society that we live in now, forced to compete for men. And it's not great, because ultimately, when we shift our focus away from women competing with their peers in academic settings or professional settings or artistic settings, whatever kind of healthy competition you want, we're not striving for the individual person to succeed. We're not saying, oh, you can, in and of yourself, be successful or be powerful or any of those things. We're saying you are kind of just a tool to get a man who can help you. And I don't know how many of you have met men, but like, men have very rarely helped me with anything. Listen, I live, love, love men. I do. I truly do. How many times have I said live, love, love? Take a shot every time I say live, love, love in this podcast. I really do love men. I mean, obviously, I'm bisexual, but it's one of those things where there are so many things that women could be competing for if we as a society shifted focus on women competing with each other for things that are worth competing for instead of men. Now, I spend a lot of time on TikTok, and don't get me wrong, I do love a little love triangle book. I do love reading a little book toxic love triangle, okay? It is my hamasha, it is my downfall, it is my fatal character flaw. I am a great feminist until it comes to smart talk, which is smutty TikTok for books. It's smutty books. That's unfortunately that is where Pankhurst is rolling in her grave. She's like, really? Anyway, I don't even remember where we are now. What were we talking about? Oh, women competing for men. That is the basis of a pick-me, right? It's this idea that instead of just being a woman who's rejecting traditionally feminine things because you either, from a feminist perspective, have been taught to be a good feminist, like I had, you need to reject feminine things because they were what was causing you not to be respected in a patriarchal society, not realizing, of course, that is what we need to overthrow, and that and that conforming to that may not be the way to be a good feminist. The reason why pick-me's are rejecting femininity is because they want to be respected also, but they're not being they don't care about it from a feminist lens, which is I want to be a good feminist. They're looking at it from the lens of I want to be a good candidate for a man. And that's the main difference between like rejecting femininity from a feminist internalized misogynistic lens and rejecting femininity from a just plain internalized misogynistic lens. The end result is the same at the end of the day. So whether you're rejecting femininity and feminine things because you've misunderstood what it means to be a feminist, or you're rejecting it because you want to be a good candidate for men, isn't that important, because at the end of the day, it's still internalized misogyny. But I do feel like it is worth mentioning that there are kind of like different avenues to get to the same endpoint. Because when you are rejecting it through a feminist lens like I did, eventually you read feminist scholars and you talk to feminists and they say, babe, I think get out of the khakis. Like, learn how to do some goddamn eyeliner, because my eyeliner is trash, because I spent so much time in my early teenage years, instead of learning how to do cute makeup, like all the girlies on TikTok now who are honestly like doing such exciting gorgeous makeup looks that I stare at. And, you know, this is kind of like my Picasso, you know, staring at someone's makeup, and it is just beautiful. Instead of being able to do that, I now can't draw an eyeliner wing. You know, I don't know how to blend foundation out. And learning how to do that when you are 24 years old is just embarrassing, because by that point, everyone thinks you've had a decade to have sorted your shit out, you know? And the truth is, I haven't. I'm not saying I've been internally misogynistic, by the way, for a decade. I have been trying on and off to do makeup for a long time, but because I missed that early window where you're a teenager and you can experiment more with being bad at makeup, and like it's okay to be bad at makeup because everyone is, because we're all new. It's more that now I am trying to experiment with makeup and I'm bad at it. And everyone around me isn't really bad at it because they did this when they were 15, you know, whereas I'm doing it now and it just somehow is so much more embarrassing. So if any of you are listening, by the way, and you are like, I'm not into makeup because feminism, or you're just, you know, I'm not into makeup because I want men to like me, whichever one of the two schools of internal misogyny you're in, doesn't really matter. Trust me, just fuck with it. It's fun. It's like painting on your face, and that is truly artistic. You know, Van Gogh would love that for you, truly. Just give it a go, is what I'm saying, because you don't want to be like me, not knowing how to do an eyeliner wing when you are literally in your mid-20s. It's a rough one. That is kind of the basis of the pick me, which is why I think it is really important to not bully pick me's to the ends of the earth. That is what I've been trying to say. I don't like going onto TikTok and seeing all this rhetoric basically bullying pick me's. Is it funny? Kind of, not gonna lie. But when women start bullying other women because those women have been indoctrinated, quite literally, by a patriarchal society and had this internalized misogyny drilled into them, bullying them doesn't really help. Because when you get those I'm not like other girls and you let those girls be literally bullied online by other girls, all it does is reaffirm to them that girls are bitchy. When you have a group of particularly young women who have had this patriarchal, and I've said patriarchal a lot. If you don't know what patriarchal means, so a patriarchal society is basically a society that's governed by men. Patriarchal standards are standards set by men, and we do in the West, particularly, well, I think there's only one surviving matriarchy in the world, and I think it's like a tribe. Essentially, patriarchy is a system of governance where essentially your economy, your society, everything is governed by men. The rules have been set by men, and that precedent has been set over a long period of time. So anytime I'm saying patriarchy, that's what it means. And it sounds like a buzzword, and I know that people think it's a buzzword, but it's the only word that can be accurate in describing the system of governments that we have. Because women have never been the overwhelming world leaders, ever, at any point in history. And matriarchies, which are systems of governance where women are the authority figures in that government, there's only one, I think, in the world. It's not a common thing, babe. Should it be a common thing? Probably. But it isn't. And so what you hear a lot of the time, you hear people online criticizing people saying, oh, patriarchy is a buzzword and all of this. And you overuse and you don't even know what it means. And most people do know what it means. It's not hard to comprehend. And when you say it a lot, people think it loses meaning. But we say it a lot because it is relevant. And there's no other way to describe the system that we are in. And so, yeah, that's what I'm saying, is that when you have these group of women, or young girls, sorry, a lot of the time, who've had this patriarchal idea shoved down their throat that they're not like other girls and they have to reject feminine things because they're not ditzy and silly and they want the boys to like them. And the only way the boys are going to like them by looking at the patriarchal framework is if they conform to more masculine things, more masculine interests. And a lot of the stereotypes that you get out of pick-me's about women is that women are bitchy, or women are gossips, women are, what's the word that I saw someone use for Emily Ratter the other day? No, oh my god, I was going to say flaccid. That's not at all the word. Like superficial. I think I wrote it down. But it's a very specific word, and I've only ever heard men use it against women. Vapid. That is the word, which, to be fair, flaccid is not that far from that. But vapid. So Emrata has a podcast, and her friends get on the podcast, and there was a podcast episode with Alexis Ren, who is a very popular IG model, and the podcast had a clip that Alexis Ren posted, and all of the comments from men, right, were, oh, this is so vapid. What does this even mean? Oh my God, they're not even saying anything. This is so dumb. LMAO, this sounds ridiculous. But there were a couple of comments from women saying similar things like, oh, this was such a vapid conversation, because they were talking and using words that basically it was like this. I just think that like the energy, like when I put my energy into people and they're on the same vibration as me, it's really good for me mentally. Like I just feel like if your vibrations are not there, why would I come down to your level? You know, it's not healthy. And that's kind of how the conversation was going. And all of these comments were just drilling into them. Oh, such a vapid conversation. This doesn't even mean anything. Like they sound so dumb. Just tell me you lack listening skills. Tell me you do not have critical thinking skills, because it's very obvious what she is saying. Unless you quite literally do not understand the context of the word vibrations, for example, if you only think of vibrations in terms of little buzzings through physical objects, fair enough. In which case you could just ask, what does vibrations mean in this context? Which I did actually see someone comment. But most people were just listening to the tone of the voice, hearing that it was a little bit nasy. They were kind of dragging onto their words a little bit, and they just say, oh, vapid. And that grinded my girdles, I'll tell you that free. Because it wasn't a vapid conversation. It was actually a very deep conversation about how she had learned to find inner peace through finding people that were closer related to her in terms of her emotional state. So she found people that were highly emotional, and that allowed her to feel more comfortable and more free in that environment, because she didn't feel self-conscious or judged when she was reacting emotionally to something, because she knew the people around her understood it. And it was actually a really kind of beautiful conversation. And anyone who was actually listening should have been able to comprehend that. But they didn't want to, because it's more fun to shit on women for expressing themselves in a way that doesn't fit the patriarchal standard that has been set. And so instead of actually listening, you just hear the tone of voice, see the fact that they're very gorgeous women, and you think, stupid. And she's not stupid. She's actually having a really intelligent conversation. But it's something that makes me so angry, because it's such a easy way to disregard women and how they think. And when you get pick-me's and they look at that and they say, oh, yeah, see, the girls are stupid. The girlies are stupid. I'm not like that. I'm not like other girls. It's kind of not their fault. It's so easy to disregard women for being the stereotype of what a ditzy woman is. And the ditzy woman stereotype is literally based on nothing to do with intelligence. It's entirely based on appearance, how you sound, the words that you use. And it really bothers me as well that people don't understand the way that you sound, the vocabulary that you use is not inherently linked to intelligence at all. If you are a truly intelligent person, you do not need to use incredibly fancy vernacular or fancy vocabulary to be able to express yourself. The most complex ideas, unless we're talking like astrophysics or something like that, can usually be simplified. And if you cannot simplify what you're talking about to a level that someone who you're talking to can commonly or easily understand, that is not intelligence. Because at that point, you lack emotional intelligence to be able to comprehend the fact that the way you're talking alienates people from the conversation. Unless you are in a highly scientific field, having a scientific conversation about molecular physics or something that is inherently complex, that needs those specific complex terminology, there is no reason why most conversation cannot be simplified. There isn't. And it reminds me of, there's a series on YouTube that says that that gets really smart people to explain an idea to like an adult, to a 10-year-old, to a 5-year-old, and basically simplify it. And it's really interesting to see the different ways that you can simplify knowledge, from very complicated, like talking to someone in your field, to just a generic adult, to a teenager, to a child. And these very intelligent, highly intelligent people can do that easily. And they can easily simplify these incredibly complex ideas because they know the ideas well enough to understand how to simplify it first and foremost, but also who their audience is. Now, there are obviously some like caveats to this. For example, if you are neurodivergent, it sometimes can be harder to read your audience, for example, and then choose the appropriate terminology. But I'm not necessarily talking about those specific cases right now. I'm just talking generally, in that a lot of the time people try to specifically discredit the ideas of women because the way that they talk, the language they use, they associate with being uneducated. Now, this is problematic for a bunch of different reasons because you can obviously just tell it's gonna have like racist undertones. It also has, ableist undertones. It has classist undertones. And so when we look at how, when you as an individual hear a certain accent or hear certain terminology or vocabulary being used and you associate that with a certain level of intelligence, you are opening yourself up to so much bias because you are going to have prejudice towards anyone who doesn't fit your mold of what it means to be intelligent, which is such a bad idea. Don't do it. But particularly when we're talking about feminism and misogyny, discrediting the way that women talk because women who are talking with other women may choose to use language that is common and easy to use and understandable to those women in that specific area, and saying that it's vapid because you aren't applying your critical thinking skills actually shows that you lack intelligence. So unless they're using terms that are like internet slang and you have no idea what it means, or it's a term or phrase that's used only in one specific area of the world, then obviously it's different and you literally cannot understand it. But I mean, internet culture is pretty universal. We are building, or at least depending on your perspective, we're either building an internet culture that's more universal or we are tearing down the boundaries between cultures that already exist. And so most slang that's on the internet, most people can commonly understand. And that's the slang that a lot of these women are using in these interviews. And so you should be able to understand them. And if you're not, you've got to think about why. You're probably either lacking in listening comprehension skills or you have a prejudice against women. And women online, young girls particularly, see this and they think, okay, so if I want to be respected, I need to use no feminine language. I need to deepen my voice. This is something that lots of women do. Lots of very successful women in tech have done this. This woman, her name's Elizabeth. She created a company called Theranos, which was a huge scam, but she modeled her whole being off of like Steve Jobs and masculine energy. And she very famously lowered her voice so that people would respect her more. And so she would walk around and kind of talk like this so that people would respect her. And it worked. I mean, she was like the most famous person in the world at one point. And it was wild, but it was a scam and she's in prison now. So what does that tell you about rejecting femininity, huh? Jail! Women see this. Young girls, sorry, I keep saying women, but like I'm mainly talking about young girls. They'll see this and see, one, that people aren't respecting women when they embrace femininity. And number two, they see that men are being, oh, we don't understand. And so women are like, okay, well, I need to not be like those women. And that feeds into this culture of being misogynistic and having internalized misogyny. So if you are a woman and you are watching a podcast with other women on, or you see a clip on TikTok, think twice before commenting something like, oh, this is such a vapid conversation, or what are they even saying? Because you're trying to get a couple of likes. You're feeding into misogyny. Like, you are quite literally, it seems like a little meme, a little funny, ha ha ha. And sometimes, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that this applies to everything, because sometimes these conversations are truly dumb. But it's the language that we use to describe the conversation and which clips it does and does not apply to. I see this comment on almost every single one of M. Ratta's interview podcast clips that I've seen. Almost every single one, multiple times. Whether or not it actually makes sense to have it on there. Now, there are clearly going to be some moments where like the podcast is not podcasting, you know what I mean? And it's not going to be big brain energy. But on every clip that I have seen where that comment has been there, it has not been relevant because what they are discussing is actual deep shit. It's something that has meaning and has significance. And people, regardless of gender, when you comment shit like, oh, that's vapid, or oh, it's pointless, or oh, what they're even talking about, oh, so dumb, they sound so stupid. Misogyny. That's all that is, babe. Don't do it. Because people see that and think, okay, I gotta not be like that. all of this feeds into the culture of like rejecting femininity, particularly for young women on the internet. And then when we have this culture of like bullying pick-me's, we shouldn't do that. Listen, it is kind of funny sometimes. Like, I will be the first to admit, sometimes bullying is hilarious. I was bullied, okay? I did deserve it at several points. I get it. Sometimes bullying, and people say that meme of, oh, bring back bullying, is to stop people acting cringy. As if being cringy is like the worst thing in the world. It's fucking not. You're just existing. If you don't fuck with what someone's doing on the internet, in terms of like, you don't like their TikTok dance or you don't like their makeup, just scroll by. You don't need to put someone else down because you have an inflated sense of self-superiority. Just leave them alone. Being cringy is not a crime. Let it alone. If they're happy and they're living their best life, leave it alone. What do you gain by being a dick, right? So when you have this culture of bullying pick-me's, because you have women who are quite literally putting themselves against other women or shitting on other women, that is bad, right? Shitting on anyone on the internet is bad, okay? Disregard everything I said about bullying being funny and me kind of deserving it. I would never apply that to anyone else, right? Okay, that's just my coping mechanism. It's humor. I don't actually mean it. Bullying is bad. And so when we bully pick-me's, particularly as women, I'm not saying we're in the wrong because technically they are shitting on other women and we don't like that. We support women, okay? But you know what we say about you support women's rights? How you also should support women's wrongs? Being a pick-me is an example of a woman's wrong, okay? Shitting on them is not helpful because all it does is allow them to see, oh, women are bitchy. Oh, we don't like women. Women really are just, group mentality. They're so mean and icky. Oh, I hate women. The guys would get it. The boys understand. You see how that will just deepen the misogyny that they feel? Instead, looking at a pick-me and recognizing that one, yes, they are making choices. Women do have free thinking and they have free thought, and they do need to be held responsible for their actions. But recognizing that the choices that a lot of young women make are heavily influenced by the socioeconomic environment they're in. The society is a patriarchal one. If you don't have and are not exposed to strong, powerful feminist women in your life, not even just feminist women, you can be a strong, powerful woman and not necessarily call yourself a feminist. Another debate for another time. I'll be honest, because I just don't get why you wouldn't, but maybe you don't like the label itself, feminism, because that kind of puts a target on your back on the internet. Fair enough. If you are not exposed to, at a young age, discussions about feminism or discussions about society in general and how it impacts women, you are not going to be able to form, at that age, an understanding truly of how being a woman in a patriarchal society will affect you, right? And so you will do whatever you need to do in order to achieve what the society tells you that you should achieve, which for women has been men. You look at media when you're a kid. I might have changed now, but when I was a kid, like, we didn't have TikTok, right? So every show that I watched, pretty much the woman's ambition in most movies or goals was either to be saved by a man, to be laid by a man, oi oi, or to get a man in general, or do something for a man. That has an impact. And you may say, oh, it's a harmless movie. Yeah, okay, sure, one time, but it was most movies growing up where women didn't really have their own personalities. Most discussions between women were about men. I mean, you have the Bechdel test, which is basically, can women in this piece of media have a conversation about something other than a man? And most of the time, they couldn't. Okay? So that has an impact on you as a person and your understanding of what it means to be a woman in the world that we live in. And so when you have these young kids, they're growing up and they're trying to figure out who they are, society plays a role in defining that. And if you are not privileged enough to be surrounded by, discussions about feminism and how feminism works and what we are trying to achieve, or the role of women, or how society impacts your ability to express yourself sometimes as a woman, and how you can get around that, or how you can still achieve what you want to achieve without compromising on your values or your interests. If you don't have those discussions and that influence in your life, you can very easily become a pick-me. Now, even if you do have those strong feminist influences, like I said, I was very much pro-justice, pro-feminist growing up. I still had a lot of internalized misogyny because it's not enough just to be exposed to strong women, but you need to be able to have these discussions about feminism and how it actually functions in the world. Because otherwise, it does express itself as internalized misogyny for a lot of people. Because you think that being a feminist means I need to be a strong woman and I need to reject femininity because I want to be respected, without realizing that is you playing into the arms of the patriarchy. Because they don't want you to be sexy and strong and intelligent and be yourself. They want you to compromise on almost everything if you want respect. Because you can't be respected and dress sexy. You can't be intelligent and like makeup. So it's like, we'll give you a crumb if you give us the whole cake. You know, it's like a trade-off always. And when we get these young women who are like, I'm not like other girls, you know, because they're obsessed with competing for men, because that's pretty much all that the culture's told them that they should be doing. And the way that we counter it and the way that we say to them, hey, we don't know if that's the best idea, is by us bullying them. It's not gonna help. They're just gonna grow up to be women that hate women, which we really just don't need. It's not a good idea. And I'm not saying that it's your responsibility to be nice to people who quite literally shit on everything that you're interested in. For example, if you're interested in makeup or you're interested in XYZ and clothing or fashion, and they're like, this is so gross, or it's not your responsibility to be like besties with them. But try not joining the dogpiling on the internet on pick-me's right now. Because yes, being a pick-me is embarrassing. And at some point, most people I know have been a pick-me. Like, at some point. I think I definitely have had internalized misogyny. I don't know if I've done it for a man, which I think is the defining feature of a pick-me, like I said earlier. But we have all had, probably most of us, maybe you haven't, good for you if not, experiences with internalized misogyny. And the way that I grew up out of that was by being exposed to feminist literature and feminist thought and feminist discussions. It was by surrounding myself with women who were truly unapologetically feminine, who recognized that they should not have to compromise on their interests, their values, their femininity for respect or for men or for anything, really. And instead focused their attention on self-love, self-respect, whether or not they were pursuing something they were interested in. And the other thing as well is that you have to remember is that when we are trashing other women online, we are quite literally just furthering the ambitions of the patriarchy. And even if it is a pick-me and it is someone who is really pissing you off because they're being paid, they're just playing up to the patriarchy and it's pathetic and blah 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 blah. When you start trashing them, you are also kind of furthering the interests of the patriarchy. This is not to say that women criticizing women is never valid. It definitely is. And I'm not saying you cannot, as a woman, criticize other women, because I love being criticized by women. Spit on me. What I'm saying is that there's a difference between valid criticism, which as a woman or as anyone really, you can give to a pick-me, you can give valid criticism and explain it. There's a difference between that and just bullying and dogpiling. And dogpiling on other women, regardless of their interests or personalities, is a terrible idea. It encourages and emboldens men to do the same and feel supported and feel valid in doing that. And they have a lot of institutional and systemic power. And being a man who is emboldened to shit on women is dangerous. It is. It's actually dangerous. It goes from being something on the internet that we're just like, lol, this is so funny, harmless comment, to not being a harmless comment at all. It's about the way in which we interact with each other as feminine people. The way that we engage with each other and criticize each other is as important as the way we support each other. I can really dislike a woman. Like, there have been people in my life that I have met who I just did not get along with. We did not vibe at all. And we didn't like each other, quite honestly. But the way that we interacted and communicated that dislike was respectful and, dare I say it, feminist. Because we didn't shit on each other like that, okay? And don't get me wrong, I gossip occasionally. I'm not gonna lie, it's a little bit fun. This is for the plot. But the way that we actually communicate dislike or disinterest is with each other is really important. And not feeding into this culture of women hating women, regardless of what it is incredibly important in general. Now, obviously, there are times I'm not, like, everything I'm saying here is obviously a generalization in a general situation, and you could come up to me and give a specific situation where quite literally shitting on a woman is appropriate. But I'm not talking about that one niche situation, whatever. I'm talking generally as a rule of thumb, something that has been really beneficial for me as an individual who is trying to pursue a more balanced life, who is trying to embrace femininity and be happy in being feminine, and enjoying being a woman. Something that has been incredibly important for me just to understand at a base level in all of my interactions is supporting women's rights, but supporting women's wrongs respectfully. You can disagree, you can really just not vibe with a person and yet remain respectful and not feeding into this culture of tearing women down, especially where men are concerned, because men see women hating on other women and they think it's okay to do it too. They don't need an excuse to do it. They're already doing it, babe. Don't embolden them further, okay? I know we covered quite a lot this episode, and it's a really long conversation, and I don't know if I particularly articulated myself well. But what I'm trying to say is that to become a pick-me, there are so many contributing factors. And the main difference between being a pick-me and being someone with just internalized misogyny is how you market yourself to men and the relevance of men within your understanding of the world. Understanding how we can undo that safely in a way that doesn't further radicalize women to become like trad wives. And I'm not saying trad wives as in traditional wives in general. If you want to be a traditional wife, I live, laugh, love you. I support you, bestie. That's part of being a feminist, is understanding that women can express themselves however they want. You can be a stay-at-home mum if you want to. But what I'm talking about is a very specific type of kind of like red pill, blue pill, right-wing marketing online for a traditional wife, which is a woman who does not respect other women for dressing a certain way, a woman who conforms to kind of like the 1950s advertising version of what a woman is. I don't know if any of this made sense, and I'm not saying that we can't criticize women as a woman. You can't. I'm not saying you can't do that, and I'm not saying that there aren't legitimate reasons to beef with someone or whatever. I'm just saying that particularly on the internet, the way that we discuss with women disagreements and the way that between women or feminine presenting people you convey dislike or disagreement in general is really important. And it does suck having to be a bit more conscious of how you express yourself on the internet just because you're a woman, but understanding that it is really important not to feed into like the culture of misogyny on the internet in the way that you disagree with women. Support women's rights, but support their wrongs too. And disagree respectfully. It's not everything on the internet needs to be a dogpiling. And although we do dogpile on men on the internet, I have noticed that the dogpiling is so much more apparent with women. It's it is. It is so easy to find examples where women are just being shat on, particularly for being cringy. As if being cringy was a crime, as if that was the worst thing to happen to someone. Let people be cringy in peace. Young people, particularly, are going to be cringy. They are going to do things that they themselves are going to look back in 10 years' time and feel embarrassed about. But then in 20 years' time, we'll be like, oh, that was actually kind of cute, bless me, and giggle because it's funny. It's funny to be able to make mistakes and have a good time without worrying constantly about how you're being perceived by other people. And if we are constantly judging women, particularly for being cringy or being embarrassing, women are not going to be able to express themselves and have the same embarrassing memories as men do. It's okay to be embarrassing. That's what I'm trying to say. It's okay to be cringe. It is not the end of the world. It really isn't. And we just need to stop treating being cringe online that way. That being said, when the cringe is misogynistic, the cuffs are coming off. Cuffs are coming out? What's the word? The cuffs are coming up? Fisticuff. I don't really know. If you see hordes of people dogpiling on a person, regardless of gender, don't join in. It's not fun because I tell you what, babe, one day you are going to be the person that everyone wants to kick and you are going to wish someone stood there and told them not to. I think it's just really important to be mindful about how intersectionality plays into things. And intersectionality is basically, in this context at least, is where, you know, lots of things can be true at once in the way that, for example, we could be talking about feminist issues, but also racism could play a factor, or class could play a factor, ableism could play a factor, right? And so when you're looking at who people are picking on the internet, just be mindful of, you know, what is their gender? What is their race? How are they presenting themselves? What other factors could be at play here where if someone who didn't look like them, sound like them, did the same thing, would they be dogpiled on? And that's something that I try and keep in the back of my mind always about whether or not something is like valid, is that if this person did not look, sound, or present themselves how they do, would another person experience the same level of hate on the internet? Like, and often the answer is no. I'm going to be completely honest. When I started looking at things like this from this lens, I started to notice that there are differing standards for what constitutes cringe and what constitutes bullyable and what constitutes, you know, a valid dogpiling on the internet, depending on what that person or who that person is, sorry. Depending on how they present themselves, depending on how they sound, look. And once you notice that and you think to yourself, oh, okay, if there was for example, a man who did this exact same thing, would they receive hate? Number one, the answer might be yes. But would they receive hate to the same degree? And yes, okay, you might say, well, that's not really a comparable case. Like, there's no example really where we have a perfect case study, right? Where we had two people of two different genders or whatever do the same thing to see if they both receive the same amount of hate. There's no like a perfect example of this. But in general, I can say, as someone who has both been on the internet for a very long time, you know, since the birth of social media, as someone who has this as a job, I have noticed that. Even between my comment section and like the comment section of men who I know, we would make very similar jokes, but I get pushed back for it and they didn't. Like, there are just different standards to what constitutes bullyable. And I just want to just keep in mind, yeah, okay, you can be wrong regardless of your gender. You can be a bad person regardless of anything else, but just be aware about how you confront someone when they're wrong and why someone might be more of a target, even if they are wrong. Why? Why might they be more of a target? You know, just keep it in the back of your mind. And I'm not saying you have to be constantly aware and vigilant, because that's exhausting. It's just a conversation to have, you know. Have a lovely rest of your day, my loves. Podcast episodes every Wednesday and Sunday. Please do give us a listen on Spotify. I think we're on Apple Music now. Please do give me a listen, give me a rating. I'm not going to tell you what to rate me, because that would that seems disingenuous. But like, just saying my favorite number is 5. And I like stars. Well, have a good day, besties. Drink some water. And I will see you on Sunday. Oh, I forgot to mention, we have a Patreon now, by the way. And you get episodes a day early on the Patreon. And you also, as of Sunday, will get a little mention at the end of the podcast. So if you want to join the Patreon, there's a link in the description down below. I also have a link on my Instagram, I believe, if you want to follow me on Instagram. Have a good rest of your day. Bye. Okay, love you. This has been a really long episode. Okay. Bye, babies. Bye.